From Wied Politics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hello, everybody. This is Kate Morton with Wied Politics, here with the Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. Today I'm here to share an interview with U.S. Representative Tony Wied. He is a Republican from De Pere, and we talked a little bit about the ongoing government shutdown and his time in Congress. So here's what he had to say. Thank you, Representative Wied, for joining me on the podcast today. I think to get us started off, let's just get into it. The shutdown that's going on right now, there doesn't appear to be any big sign of compromise at this point. Neither side is completely budged. So what do you see as the best path forward from your perspective to end this shutdown?
I came from the private sector. I ran my own business, my wife and I, for almost 30 years in northeastern Wisconsin. So I've been at this job here being a representative of the great people of Wisconsin's 8th District for less than a year. But what I've seen from our leadership on the Republican side is this direction of getting back to regular order in Congress. We've gone for decades without ever passing actual appropriations the way it's supposed to be, and that's why we continue to see omnibus bills and minibus bills and continuing resolutions. While I was in the private sector, that's what we saw. But this year we're moving towards actually going through the appropriations process, which is bipartisan committees in the House and Senate, and really getting back to regular order. Of course, the time kind of ran out. We need to have something done by the end of September. So that's why House Republicans passed a clean continuing resolution, which is really just keeping the funding the way it was, which is really spending levels at Biden administration spending levels. Again, while it gives us more time, about 7 weeks to get through the appropriations process. And for some reason, now I don't know why House Democrats, there was one that voted for it, because this is something that's been voted for many, many times, certainly during the Biden administration, 13 times. I'm not sure why they didn't vote for it, but what really struck me was the fact that there was really no bipartisanship in the Senate, that you need 60 votes to pass something in the Senate, and with only 53 Republicans, which means 47 Democrats, the Senate has decided to not pass it and to basically vote to shut the government down. Now, it's been 13 times that it's come to a vote in the Senate. And again, for some reason, people like Tammy Baldwin continue to vote to shut the government down. They've always voted for continuing resolutions. So from my standpoint, being new to Congress, I am just floored that Tammy Baldwin would follow Chuck Schumer and just vote to shut the government down. I don't understand it. So where is the end in sight? I think there is an off-ramp for Senate Democrats. There's the unions that represent the great people that work for our federal government are demanding that Democrats in the Senate vote to open back the government. Certainly we're at a crisis now with food stamps that are at risk. Here just in the next day or so, funding for WIC. We're not paying the great people in air traffic control and TSA. So look, I continue to ask, why isn't Tammy Baldwin voting to open up the government? I don't understand it. But again, I think the pain's there, although they continue to play politics of pain right now. And for some reason, they're trying to get leverage. And I don't know why we don't just open the government back up.
Well, I will note Senate Democrats, at least most of them, have their own separate proposal to reopen the government, which Senator Baldwin has supported. But I do want to ask you, in the House, Speaker Johnson, he hasn't brought back members since September 19th before the shutdown started. So why not bring lawmakers back to discuss a possible compromise on this?
It's an easy solution. All we do is open the government up. We just need 5 more Democrats in the Senate, which Tammy Baldwin could go get 4 other people, open it up. I'm on a 48-hour notice, and we'll go back and get to work and do what the American people need us to do. Right now, we're not in session because Tammy has voted to shut the government down. All you have to do is open it up. We all get back to work, and we need to get back to work to get through the appropriations process, certainly to fund all of the great programs that we have to help those that are vulnerable. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Just open the government back up. Everyone get back to work.
You mentioned the food stamp issue, which has been a big concern this week. The funding is set to cut off at the end of the month. USDA is saying there's a lawsuit related to that right now. But do you agree with the Trump administration's assessment that they can't use that emergency SNAP funding?
Well, I'm not in the administration. I think the administration's doing everything they can. They've certainly done things to pay our great military. They're also not getting paid during a shutdown. The administration's already worked on solutions for women, infant, and children, which is so important for those young mothers that have children that need that the nutrition and the care. There's a lot. There just is probably very little money at this point with the government being shut down. Easy solution is that Tammy Baldwin and Senate Democrats just need five more, open the government back up. We're not reducing spending at all from Biden era spending levels. And then everybody will open that all back up. And I think that's the right thing to do. That's certainly the easiest thing to do right now as well. So again, I think it's so important that Senate Democrats open the government back up.
Yeah, another aspect is Senate Democrats want to see Affordable Care Act enhanced tax credits renewed. They're really pushing to get that done at the same time as reopening the government. And premiums are expected to more than double for some Wisconsinites. In general, do you support renewing those tax credits?
Yeah, I've come from the private sector where I've seen my insurance rates go up over 70% since the Affordable Care Act, which I call the Unaffordable Care Act. Rates have gone up for everyday Americans over 60%. Some say over 70 or 80% increases. So the problem with the Affordable Care Act is it was a very partisan legislation that's very complicated, that has really enriched health insurance companies and really has put the burden on everyday Americans to pay just a lot more for their health care. And so the system is completely flawed. 5 years ago, Democrats in a partisan fashion spent hundreds of of dollars to basically throw money at a program that wasn't working to try to prevent increases in healthcare costs with an expiration date of this year. So it was a temporary measure during the COVID era. And it really didn't work. I mean, rates continue to go up, costs continue to go up. People are being bankrupted, unfortunately, due to healthcare costs. So now all of a sudden this has come up, and I don't know why this wasn't something they had talked about earlier in the year. I'm in favor of lowering prices for everyday Americans and digging in and finding out solutions and getting back to the free market. The more government's been involved in our healthcare, the more prices have continued to rise. Now Democrats are demanding in the Senate that we spend another 300 to 350 billion dollars just to try to stop rates from going up too much. Because again, it is a flawed legislation, but we need to be back together, all of us in Washington, working on this and many other things to really work for the American people.
Yeah, some Republicans have said, they're willing to or sorry, extend these enhanced tax credits, but they want to have that conversation after the government is reopened. Is that where you stand? What's your position on that?
Well, we should be there. Really, again, this was a continuing resolution, something that Tammy Baldwin voted for 13 times during the Biden administration. Tammy voted for a continuing resolution earlier this year. And if we just simply would have voted for that, keeping funding the way it was, we would be there working on it. And so that's why I don't understand. I think really this is political. This is really, the Democrats' way of trying to push back against President Trump, push back against Republicans in the House, what the great work that we've been doing this year to try to prevent us from continuing the great work. And again, this is really political. These are career politicians that just continue to do what's in their own best interest. Chuck Schumer's worried about a primary and getting voted out of office, so he has to lean into that radical far left agenda, which is really absurd and unfortunate. Again, we need to be back to work, working on this and many other things for the American people. It's very easy. All we need is five more votes in the Senate.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned you've been in Congress for less than a year, so I'm curious, so far, what are some of the things that you've learned about being a lawmaker in Washington?
It's very different than the private sector. I think, there are three branches of government. You have the executive branch with the president, the judiciary with the Supreme Court, and then we have the legislative branch. I'm a member of the House of Representatives, which is 435 members. And then, of course, in the legislative branch, you have the Senate, which is 100 members. It's a lot slower process. Certainly, lawmaking is than working in a private business or in the private sector. It's certainly messy, but I think that was the way the founding fathers intended. That it requires debate and people coming together to work through things to solve them. But it's been a great opportunity. I think it's a leadership role. We do great work in the district, helping people with issues with the federal government, whether that's the IRS. We help people with veterans issues, immigration. But ultimately, just it's a lot of the same fundamentals in business as being a good leader, being honest and authentic, and it's an honor to serve the people in Wisconsin's 8th District.
Yeah, is there anything in particular that you've been able to accomplish so far that you're particularly proud of?
This year, we were able to pass, I think, the best, most consequential tax policy that we've seen, certainly in my lifetime, and giving more relief to everyday Americans. My goal was always to put more money back into people's pockets. I think, we're taxed at a very high rate. And what we did is put more money back into everyday Americans with no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, increase the child tax care credit, relief for those on Social Security that they don't have to pay those federal taxes. They paid enough in their lifetime at that age. And so I think that is something I'm very proud of. We did that with the One Big Beautiful Bill, the working families tax cuts. And again, I'm going to continue to try to reduce spending and ultimately put more money back into people's pockets. Our government, Congress, is addicted to spending. We spend almost $2 trillion more than we bring in. That continues to devalue our dollar. That hurts the poor and the middle class. And ultimately, I think we just need to continue to do what's right for our economy, for people, and allow for people to really live the American dream.
Right. Well, thank you again, Representative Wied, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Kate. Have a good day.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Capitol Chats. If you would like to learn more about the government shutdown, you can subscribe to our DC Wrap newsletter or head to wispolitics.com. In the meantime, I'm Kate Morton. Thanks for tuning in to WisPolitics Capitol Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.